Okay, you kids, it's fun to be with you again. I'm going to briefly mention before we start that I would encourage you to go visit the forum on the membership site. I'm visiting the forum 2 or 3 times a week, and more people are going there, and we are encouraging some lively discussions. Also, soon to be on the membership blog page. If you don't see it, you're going to blame it entirely on Inga and Alicia. Those are the 2 people. Is going to be video clips, which we're going to be putting up at least once a week. We're going to play around, maybe twice a week, maybe 3, I don't know, something. But it'll be more than you were promised when you joined. So there's going to be way more seminars that we've archived that I didn't know about. So we're editing clips, 3 to 5 minute clips from those, and Donna's going to be taking little spontaneous clips when I have little things to say, the nice things. And so we're going to, those should appear by the end of the week. First question. Great question, by the way. There's a lot of talk about choices in real love. You can smell what's coming before I get going. You get to choose. I recognize that it is true that I can choose, for example, at the end of the day, I can choose to reflect on what I'm grateful for in that day, or I could worry about tomorrow, or gripe about what didn't happen, or I can choose to see the opportunities in whatever I am and whatever I am, whatever I am and whatever I have, instead of just the negatives. Or I can choose to remember the few people that love me versus the many that don't. It seems then that I can enter into any situation and choose my response. I can choose to be happy and loving in any situation. So, kind of. Choice is huge. Choice is at the center of everything. It is, I maintain, the single most important principle in all the universe. No kidding. It's everything in life. It's what makes us different from animals and rocks. But we have a choice only when 2 things are true. 1, I can see the choice. Never said it quite this succinctly, probably because I didn't understand it this well. And 2, I have the ability to make the choice. So notice, seeing the choice and having the ability to make the choice are not the same. Example, tennis. I played tennis for years. My game was pretty good. I was pretty fast. I could hit the ball hard, but I wasn't great. I had a choice to hit each shot better. To use the example that you just gave, I had a choice to hit each shot better, and I had a choice to elevate my game overall. But 1, I didn't know how to make the better choice because I didn't even know there was a better way to swing a racket. And 2, I didn't have the practice. So I didn't have the ability. So even though I could watch a video about how to play tennis better, that doesn't instantly give you the ability, as how many million golfers can tell you who have watched videos and read books on how to have the perfect golf swing, and their swing is less than perfect despite the instruction. So how does this apply to real love or to choice? Theoretically, we can choose to be more loving at any point in the day, theoretically. But if we don't even see the loving choice, as virtually none of us do, then it does not exist practically. I talk all day, every day, to people who have been miserable all their lives because they've never even seen unconditional love. So how could they possibly choose to feel loved or to be more loving? They couldn't. They could not. The choice doesn't exist. 2. So now we have some people who have studied real love. We talked about the knowledge first. So we've got people who studied real love, read the books, gone to a seminar, but they haven't actually trusted or applied or experienced it. They haven't so they don't have the real love. They don't have the ability. So they can't feel it or give it. Or they might actually be given it, but they don't trust it. So they don't feel it. Either way, they might have the knowledge, but not the ability to feel or share real love. So without knowledge and ability, we don't really have the choice, much as we might like to think that we do. We love to talk about it, but choice only exists with those two things. You continue. Therefore, anyone could, for example, spend a week with their family and simply choose to be happy and loving, or spend all day every day with empty and demanding colleagues and be happy and loving. Yeah, theoretically. But remember what I just said. Knowledge and ability. You continue. I'm not able to do this yet, for the reasons 1 and 2 I talked about. Better than the past, but it can still feel like an endurance test. There are people in real love, for example, who don't spend time with their families. They don't quit their job. They don't spend time with their families, or they do quit a job to get away from these stressful situations. If it is just about choosing, surely you could stay in your job and just choose to be happy no matter how miserable or difficult your colleagues were. You could choose to spend a week with your family and choose to be happy even if they conversed on subjects that don't interest you or didn't listen to a word you said. You could sit there choosing to be blissful and happy and loving. Again, back to the tennis. I can watch a tennis video and watch and see how to hit a tennis ball perfectly. I could then go out and practice. Not likely I would do well at Wimbledon, at a Grand Slam tournament, or any other Grand Slam tournament. Not ready for it. So we may be in the early stages of learning real love, but not yet capable of handling really difficult situations in our families or at work. So in order to heal, some people in real love simply have to avoid the unnecessary and crushing burdens in their lives. Some people have to quit their jobs. They do. I've actually told some people, is there such a thing as an emergency leave? A guy called me, he was in an absolute panic. Work was crushing him. He was just learning real love. Is there such a thing? And he said, yeah, you can get an emergency family leave for like 3 months. I said, get it. So he got an emergency leave. He was off work for 3 months while he learned to feel loved, because his job was, it was like he was carrying around a car. Well, that doesn't make you more physically fit. It's not like, yeah, we get stronger the heavier the object, but after a certain weight, it doesn't make us stronger. It kills us. So instead of carrying around a car, he put the car down and he learned to lift weights a bit at a time. And eventually, he discovered that A, he probably could carry a car, but B, his situation at work turned out not to be as heavy as a car. So some people have to quit their jobs. Some people have to absolutely stop being around their family, period. Remember, our families put us where we are. In almost every case, our families are the ones that created our pain and fear. So I've told many people for a period of 30 days, 90 days, a year, no contact with your family. And then I get these impassioned, angry calls from the family members telling me that I'm a horrible person, which, I can live with. It's just because it's crushing to these people. That's all. It's not an insult to the family. It's not cowardice. It's just practical. You continue. I spent a day with my family yesterday, which I hadn't done for a long time, and I found by the end of the day I was drained. I found the interactions between my parents and my sister-in-law and niece just unbearable to watch. It was like an actual physical pain in my chest. When my mother talked on and on, I struggled to listen. I knew it would be loving to do so, but I found I couldn't do it. I could not listen to her. I wanted to get away. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. I felt inadequate. I felt I wasn't good enough. I felt worthless. I felt stupid. I felt unhappy. I chose to leave. I do not think I could have stayed there and chosen to be loving and happy. I just couldn't. So if it's just about choosing, why do people suggest not speaking to your parents or leaving that job? And we've already explained that, right? So again, it's about knowledge and ability. You attempted to go to a family event where you knew you were overmatched. You knew you were overwhelmed. People discover that as they practice lifting the small weights, they can eventually go back with their families. I can't think of anybody, there might be some people that I've talked to who I've recommended not talk to their families ever again. No, they stay away from your family till you heal. Then eventually our families are great practice fields for learning to love, but not when you're too weak to do it. So I happen to know you, the person who's asking the question. You have been avoiding intimate connection with people all your life, which is understandable since your family made connecting intolerable. So what have you done? You've stayed distant, afraid, angry, withdrawn. I've tried to get close to you. You won't let it happen. Others have tried. You won't let it happen. So you talk about your pain, you criticize choice, you criticize the steps even that have to be taken in order to learn to be unconditionally loving. But you don't trust the love that's necessary to eliminate your pain. I have no criticism here. Your family life was a horror show. So instead of spending time with them, the people who crushed you in the beginning and crush you now, throw yourself wholeheartedly into trusting the people who really can love you. At some point, honey, you got to take a chance. I was recently reading an article, I can't remember why, but it had something to do with Freud. Freud was moderately crazy, but he did at least introduce a concept called transference, which is normally, in psychiatric terms, refers to the fact that the patient transfers to the therapist the feelings that the patient acquired toward people early in life, usually their parents. So if they were, like, say, angry at their father, then they'd be angry at the therapist. If they felt sexually seduced or had sexual feelings toward their mother, then they experienced the same feelings toward the therapist. But the true meaning of transference is that we transfer to anybody in the present the feelings we acquired from the past. And that's what you do. Most people don't ever live. They don't ever actually make choices. You brought up the word choices, and here I am using it. We don't make choices. We simply transfer. We live a life of, it's like a play. We live transference. Every person we meet in our life, we treat and feel toward as though they were somebody from our past. So, and we do it without thinking. So, our boss, automatically we treat like he was our dad. Every woman in our life we treat like they were our mother or our sister or whatever. We live transference instead of living a life. It's pretty sad. At some point, unless we want to die miserable and alone, we have to make a choice to trust that people might be different from the people who raised us. What a thought. That everybody isn't the three people we knew. Mom, dad, and a sister. Most people really, that's how limited their lives are. Everybody they meet falls into one of those categories. Somebody they knew. Why not start over? I'm not saying do it randomly, pick people off the street, but start with people in real love who at least appear to be happy. And try it differently. Thought. Each week, we'll see how long this lasts. It depends on how long she comes up with these, but each week we're going to do a little feature called Sylvie's Corner. I'll probably forget that that's the name of it by next week and call it something else, but Sylvie's a 3-year-old grandchild, and she amazes me because she's been raised with unconditional love from birth. So she says and does things that most of us as adults couldn't do. They amaze me, and I've been doing this for a long time. She demonstrates the effects of not having to heal from wounds. She demonstrates what it's like to not have them in the first place. It's kind of amazing. So, for example, her mother, my daughter, Jeanette, will sometimes, she has 3 kids, Jeanette does. 3, 2, and nothing. something months. Until they get to be 1, I just call them nothing. 3 kids, 3 and under. That's a lot. 1 child, 3 and under, is enough to make you tear your hair out. So she has 3 of them. And so occasionally, with, all 3 of them being little children, she finds herself frazzled or impatient, possibly even annoyed. And when that happens, she sends me these. Jeanette does, every few days. So the other day, Sylvie said, "Mom, could you please stop frowning at me?" I love this because simultaneously we see what somebody would do if they weren't afraid. She just asks for what she wants. She's saying, "Mom, I don't like it when you communicate. I don't love you to me with your frown. So would you please stop that?" Not annoyed, not afraid, no crying. And this is with a mother who's made a mistake. We don't have to make a great big thing of it. She just says, "That's not working for me." And even though the mom's making a mistake in that moment by frowning, imagine how much love her mother, my granddaughter's mother, would have to have demonstrated to her child so that her child had no fear of saying that to her. How many of you listening to me right now could have said to your mother, "Would you please stop frowning at me"? I couldn't have said that. My children couldn't have said that until they were half raised and almost out of the house. So it's a remarkable thing for a child to say. Or she said the other day, "Mom, that wasn't a nice way to say that. Could you say it another way?" It's remarkable. Now this is from Jeanette. She said, "Today my 3 kids all have runny noses and diarrhea. Even more fun. Around 4 o'clock, I was worn out and I was getting irritated. Bruce, age 2, was playfully kicking his feet while laying on his back for a diaper change." If any of you ever changed a kid's diapers who's kicking his feet, it's harder. After several gentle requests to stop, I physically pinned down his legs, locked eyes with him, and deliberately pushed aside my motherly affection and was determined to get this task over with. I told him to stop. He began to cry. Sylvie says, "You shouldn't say that angry at Bruce." Jeanette says, "Well, what should I do?" Sylvie says, "Ask him nicely." I love these. Jeanette says, "I tried that. What should I do when I ask him nicely and he still doesn't listen?" Sylvie says, "Take him to his room for a break." Jeanette says, "That's what we usually do when a child becomes unmanageable." She said, "I'm glad that somebody had their head on straight today." In this case, the 3-year-old. Here's a member who says, "I heard a coach recently tell a caller who described herself as addicted to giving advice, the suggestion that the advice giver ask her partners, whoever she was talking to, if they wanted to simply be heard or to have her advice. My response, unspoken, was that the more important issue was the addiction to advice giving and not the particular advice that she gave to this person or that person. So I would have suggested a time of no advice at all. What do you think?" So let me answer it in the form of a question and we'll keep talking. If you're a cocaine addict, what's the approach? Would you suggest to a cocaine addict that they ask people when they want to use if a given dose of cocaine would be good or bad? No, you wouldn't. But that's what the coach suggested to the advice giver. The advice giver is a controller. And the coach is suggesting that a controller ask people whether they want to be controlled. Now, think about this. What kind of people would a controller be around? Controllers select as their friends, the people they talk to, people they can control. So what good would it do to ask? Because controllable people will let a controller do anything. Second, even if people said they didn't want advice, what would a controller do? Oh, they'd pause for about 8 seconds, about long enough for a bull rider to stay in a bull. And then they'd go back to controlling and giving advice. And it's unlikely that anybody would stop the controller. So back to the cocaine solution. What do you do with any addiction. The only way for you to find out what it's like to be sober is to stop. No drug treatment center that I know of in the world takes people into their center and weans them off cocaine. They stop it. Possibly the same here, since addictions vary almost imperceptibly. It's just the substance or the behavior that changes. The addictive need is the same. It's pain. So what's the solution? Stop the controlling. No advice. None. For about a year, when I first started practicing what would turn into real love, I just shut up. I didn't give advice to anybody. I didn't offer my wisdom, nothing. And I learned a couple of really important things. I learned that, one, nobody needed my advice. My feelings were a little bit hurt by that, but I discovered that the world turned just fine without me controlling it. And two, I discovered I didn't need to give advice. I was fine. And how did I discover this? There's only one way for you to know what life would be like without the use of your drug, with your addiction. Stop. I stopped talking. No advice. I often give this suggestion to people who are controllers. Sometimes 30 days, sometimes more, sometimes a year. You can't know till you quit. And in most addictive circles, people will tell you that you really don't know what it's like to be clean, to be sober, to be non-addicted, till you've quit for about a year. Now, if you quit drinking, all of the alcohol will be out of your system, all of it, in less than 24 hours. So it's not about just getting rid of the substance or the behavior. It's getting rid of the mindset that it's always there to rescue you, that it's part of your life, that you can always use it. It was a year after I quit using drugs before I realized, so this is what sober is like. The problem with giving advice is that if I'm giving you advice, I'm not really listening to you. So I'm not loving. And I'm not really present. Advice giving keeps you separated from people. You're fixing them instead of accepting them. So yet another tip for controlling. If you really want to know if you're controlling, because people will often call me and say, I think I've got this controlling thing licked. And I say, well, here's an assignment then. And I'll pick somebody in their life that they've controlled extensively in the past. Go ask your husband, do I ever control you anymore? If your husband, I said, it's not the words I care about. I want you to report back to me exactly what he does. If he goes, well, that means, yeah, you really do, and I'm even afraid to answer your question. So you're controlling me a lot. Or you ask a child, or somebody that you've been doing this with a lot. Now, there's a little... You asked for some suggestions, so I admit that as I've been listening to you and talking to you, I've been giving you advice, as well as understanding what's going on. Sometimes we're asked for it, and if you're asked as a wise person for advice, sometimes it's okay to give it. Even then, sometimes it's not. Just because somebody asks you for it doesn't mean they're ready to hear it, and it doesn't mean you're ready to give it. So to get over controlling, that's a tough one. After you withdraw from it, where you don't speak for 30, 60, 90 days, a year, whatever, practice listening before a word of advice even crosses your mind. Ask some wise men and women how they listen. Ask to get on a call with them and somebody else, and you practice being the wise man or woman and ask for their feedback, whether you controlled or whether you actually listened. Participate in conference calls, in groups. But again, if you've been a controller and advice giver, you're the last person to ask if you're improving. Controllers always tell, oh, I'm doing much better. Really? Do you mind if I call your husband? Get the feedback from people who know what controlling is like, and people who have the courage to tell you that you're controlling. So it's a pretty tough addiction, as well, frankly, any addiction is. Addiction is just simply pain relief. And who likes to be in pain? So giving up any form of pain relief that we use habitually, which is what an addiction is a pretty tough thing to do, because then we're left with the panicky feeling that we've got our pain and no relief. Not many people are really eager to do that, you know? Here's a member who says, years ago, my daughter married a troubled man, and they had a son, my grandson, Calvin. Cal couldn't see his father from ages 2 through 4 because his father was forbidden to be around minors, any minors, including his own kids, having been convicted of inappropriately touching underage girls when he was drunk. Now, again, Cal's father is forcibly removed from his life because he's living for 3 years in a halfway house for alcoholics, where he can't visit minors. What did I just say about how hard it is to give up addictions of any kind? And notice this guy's addiction isn't just to drinking. He does all kinds of things. You continue. Calvin says, I miss my dad. I'm so angry that he left me again. I want to see him. Look at the apparent contradiction. See? I'm angry at him, but I miss him and I want to see him. That's the position that children are in all the time. They want our love badly. But then when we don't love them, we hurt them badly. So they get hurt and or angry. You continue. My daughter wants to know how she can help Calvin to feel better. Well, first thing she could do is, he's 9.5, so he's old enough to get this. You explain real love to Cal. Use really personal examples of where Cal has been unconditionally loved and where he hasn't, both by his mother and his father. So this is the mother telling Cal. You have to do both. You have to say, Cal, here's where I haven't been unconditionally loving towards you, and here's where your father has not been unconditionally loving, so that he sees this isn't an attack of anybody. It's to help him understand his life. Then ask Cal, this is all things that you're going to suggest to your daughter, how he's felt when he wasn't being loved. He's already used the word angry, but give him some more opportunities to express how he feels. Then explain that his father wasn't unconditionally loved at all. And the pain of that awful childhood has followed him all his life. See the correlation? You say, Cal, you have felt terrible every time you haven't been loved by me or your father. And your father's felt pretty bad all of his life because he wasn't loved either. It's made him angry. It's led him to drink to relieve his pain and whatever other behaviors the child happens to know about. I don't know if he knows about the, touching underage girls. Just talk about the things the kid knows. So he's done things, the father, in his pain that have been socially unacceptable. In some cases immoral, wrong, illegal. So he's been forcibly separated from you, Cal, twice for periods of years. Why? Because you're bad? No. Because your father's bad? No. Pain. That's all. Really kind of similar to if your father got cancer, they'd put him in the hospital and give him cancer chemotherapy. And if his immune system got sufficiently impaired, they wouldn't let you see him then either. It's not really his fault. The kid, if you explain this right, because I've had this explanation with kids, they can understand how it hurts them, but it wasn't really a conscious choice on the part of their parents. And now your daughter gets to commit to change all that. She can, for example, read the parenting book. Now, this is assuming that she's willing to listen to you. I don't know about that. She'll read the parenting book with her son, with Cal, and point out where she's made mistakes. Because as you read the parenting book, there are hundreds of opportunities as a parent to point out and say to your kids, well, I did that. Yeah, I've done that wrong. I did that wrong with you 5 minutes ago. Don't be general. Say, I remember yesterday when I was angry at you? Wrong. And point out where Cal's father's done the same stuff. When Cal is in pain, she needs to look for it. You can see it on his face, pretty easy, and she needs to tell him why he's in pain. Even if she offers the same explanation over and over, and love him. She needs to admit her present mistakes in real time. This is all just basic real love 101. that, or Real Love and Parenting 101, that mom is going to be practicing with your grandson. She can make a huge difference in this kid's life. When Cal says, I really miss him and I want to see him, what Cal's really saying is, I want to feel loved. So if he's getting enough love from his mother, then he can hear, you can't see your father yet. But when he's more healed, you'll be able to. Kids just want enough love. They don't care who it comes from. So kids can live in just miserable situations in foster homes. But they look for all the world like they're completely happy when they're sitting on Santa Claus's lap. They just want to feel loved, even for a moment. So at some point, promise to Cal that he'll be able to talk to his father about the pain that his father caused him all those years, so that perhaps some healing can take place. Perhaps you, the grandmother, can help with that conversation, can help your daughter, can be there maybe. And with what your daughter says to him now, you can help her so that he doesn't have to wait for 3 years for his father to get out of a halfway house to resolve his pain. 3 more years of pain, my gosh, he'll be crippled by then. So to answer your question, there's a lot you can do, a whole lot. Kids in pain, that's an emergency room. It's an emergency. Everything stops. The parents can wait, but kids can't. The deeper the wounds, the harder they are to heal. Next question. What does it take for me to stop making everything about me after 5 decades of being a selfish parent? Excuse me. Some might just make up words when I can't read. After 5 decades of being a selfish toad, especially as I've done so while masquerading as a selfless, benevolent princess. Looking good has been my thing. So first, let's address the general situation and then the specifics. Looking good is a serious, usually lifelong, life-threatening, and often unfixable addiction. If we can't be loved unconditionally, then looking good and creating a good impression so people will like us is pretty irresistible. Like, duh. Let's look at some of the problems with that. Why is it often unfixable and unstoppable? Well, first, who would ever stop us? People like us to look good. Whoever says to a beautiful woman, oh, just wear a bag over your head. No, we like it when the people around us look good, when they entertain us. We like it when people put forth a good persona because it entertains us, it serves us, it makes life easy for us, we feel safer, we feel comfortable. Nobody will ever say to you, would you stop earning my approval and just be inconvenient or rude or thoughtless or whatever you feel like? So once we're addicted to pleasing people, we're pretty stuck because other people aren't going to stop us. Second, the idea of stopping our addiction to looking good is kind of unthinkable. I was referring to it earlier when I said all addictions are just simply addictions to pain relief. And the thought of stopping that is unbearable. Suddenly stop earning approval and go from a life of conditional love to nothing. So now you have no unconditional or conditional love. You're kidding. It'd be like choosing to live in the vacuum of outer space. Too hard for most of us to do, certainly without help. So we're stuck. We just keep masquerading. We keep playing a game. We keep living in transference. We're not even present. We're not alive. You continue. Here's an example of a situation I'll soon meet, and I don't know how to deal with it lovingly. After half a century of muscle memory or emotional memory, I don't know what it might actually look like to deal with a situation, big or small, without making it all about me. Over the 7 years that I dated Max, I projected my feelings of being empty, afraid, and never enough onto him, and vacillating between feeling he was the one and marrying him, and feeling that there was some other more special relationship out there for me. So I refused to get close to him. Total schoolgirl fantasy garbage. Yeah, you're right. Good insight. The power of this fantasy cannot be overstated. It's the basis for romance novels, almost all romantic comedies, other movies, books, finding the one. Why would we be obsessed with that? Because it's magical and we don't have to do any personal work. Kind of like winning the lottery, but emotionally speaking, it's crap. Almost entirely foolishness. It's not about finding the one. So what's it about? Well, lots of things, but I'll suggest a few. First, preparing to be a loving person. Finding unconditional love. Telling the truth. Giving up your addictions like we just talked about. Trusting the love you find. Remembering the love you find. Are you doing that? That's the important question. You're beginning to do this in some areas of your life, but you know, like with your children. But are you really getting intimate with other real love people and getting genuine feedback instead of assessing your own growth? Well, I know you. Not really. You're still playing the entitled, manipulative princess. And that's not a criticism. I love you enough to tell you that, which is why on many occasions you have felt that banging on the back of your head when you hit the ceiling of your own growth. You get only so far, and because you're not willing to be completely open and vulnerable and trusting and not manipulating and giving up your addicting behaviors, your progress can't keep going. 2, you got to find somebody who's willing to love you in a similar way, but there's no sense even looking for somebody who's loving till you are. That's just pointless. For one thing, you're not going to attract them. On many occasions, people have bemoaned that they were single. Oh, I just can't find anybody to marry. And I say, well, I don't know a polite way to tell you this. If there were an unconditionally loving person, the person that you're looking for, they wouldn't even take a second look at you. They wouldn't. Because you're not loving. So why would an unconditionally loving person be attracted to you when you're selfish and bitter and angry and addicted? They wouldn't. So number 1's the most important thing, becoming a loving person. Then number 2, we find somebody who's also interested in being loving. Notice I said also, not loving in return. And if you find those 2 things, you're willing to be loving and they're willing to be loving, willing to learn, then you pretty much got it made. I know everybody thinks otherwise, but Donna's not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm not even close. But we're working at it. And we can see that the other person's working at it. So that's pretty fulfilling. And we're both pretty darn grateful. We feel very fortunate. And yet, it wasn't just luck. You really have to work to be open and vulnerable and find love and trust it and remember it and constantly be working on yourself instead of blaming your partner, which is pretty easy to do. You continue. I had no idea how to love a flea. He eventually met someone else, a lucky escape for him, and is happily married, I'm told. I hear she's one of the 1 to 2% of naturally, unconditionally loving people on earth, which would be just as he deserves. He might be. She might be. Probably not. I hear about these people from time to time, but almost never does it turn out to be true. A man recently wrote me, just within the last week, telling me about how he has no affection for his wife, doesn't have sex with her, doesn't spend time with her, won't have a child with her. She spends all of her day crying and fussing and washing her hands excessively and cleaning the house, OCD out the ears. They're miserable. And when I asked about how much unconditional love he had in his life, which was really just a rhetorical question, he told me that he was utterly and completely unconditionally loved from birth by his entire family, his extended family, all of his friends. He didn't say the school crossing guard, but he might have thought it. He's been unconditionally loved all of his life, and yet he's miserable, controlling, and has no affection toward his partner. Likelihood of this? 0. So I get claims all the time that somebody's unconditionally loving. It's just almost never true. That's how rare it is in the world. You continue. I also hear that my old boyfriend Max and his wife are in town for the summer. Now, while I'm off the social circuit now in favor of real love stuff, the chances of bumping into them are pretty remote. But if we met, I'd like to be loving. I'd like to tell the truth about what a selfish, insane jerk I was, and wish them well. But it seems like every version of this story that comes to mind is still about me. An example. Last night I dreamed this. We meet on the beach, and these two are love's young dream. So when we greet, I say to her, I just want to say that when I continued to call Max after you two guys started dating, thinking he and I could just be friends, I was selfishly insane and a mad woman. In fact, I have been all my life, which Max eventually figured out. It's lovely for me to know that he's happy, and lovely for me to finally meet you. And with a smile, I leave. That's the dream. You continue. I know, all about me, me, me. In fact, any such attempt to fall on my sword is all about me, isn't it? They're not asking for my contrition, and I'm simply trying to portray how cool I am now. Yuck. So, what would not be thus? Would I just smile, say hi, and walk by? Would I cross over the road? Your thoughts. Actually, most of what you said would work. There's nothing wrong with the words. It all depends on how you feel as you say it. Entirely. Whether you feel like like you just said it, it's all versions of falling on my sword, which means that's how you feel. Whereas if you feel genuinely sad for the pain that you caused, if you feel genuinely open in revealing your mistakes, using exactly the words you just used would work. You could say, Max, I've only recently begun to learn what love even is. I was a selfish, insane person when you and I were together. I just wanted you to know that. You don't even have to respond to what I'm saying. And Susie, whatever her name is, my insanity affected you too. Affected you also early in the relationship with Max. My mistake. I'm really happy for you. You're just, notice what matters most isn't the words I just said, it's the tone. You're just stating what you did, how it affected them. You're not apologizing, you're not feeling bad, you're not catastrophizing, you're not trying to get attention or sympathy, none of that. So, bottom line of this long question, and probably a regrettably long answer, is you got to be more open, kid. You're still posturing, you're still a princess, you're still being special, you're not being humble like a child. You need to be a kid. You need to be healed like a kid. And then all these good things will start happening in your life. After you heal, you can be happy. After you heal, you're not in pain. After you heal, you don't have to posture and manipulate and be a princess and be special. Be a kid. You can do it. A coach writes about a real love group that she's hosting. She says, a new member is always making references to other philosophers and religious concepts and other books. I want to keep the group purely about real love. Is that wrong? If not, or if so, how do I address this with him? This other stuff you're talking about, philosophers and books and stuff, almost always creeps into real love groups eventually. And there's almost always good material involved. There's truth found all over the place. Truth comes in many forms. However, would you walk into a mosque and insist on passing out pamphlets on Christianity? No. Why? Well, rude, but distracting. People are there to learn about Islam or to pray in the Muslim way. That's why they're in this is the clue, mosque. This is no comment either about the relative validity of Islam or Christianity. It's about the purpose of the mosque. That's why the people are there. Make it not religious. Would you walk into a physics class and raise your hand and make a comment on English literature? No. Same reason. Distracting. English lit is not why people are there. so you would be a distraction. In a class in the Japanese language, you wouldn't interrupt to speak in Portuguese. Same with a real love group. People have come to a real love group to learn about that. And the best way is to be immersed in that subject and not to be distracted by the introduction of other subjects or how other subjects interdigitate or weave or don't weave into the subject that people came to learn about. It's just distracting. So what do? The instant that he brings up one of these other subjects, you interrupt. I mean, like within the first 3 words, when he says, well, you know, in the philosophy of, you go, you put up your hand and go, whoa, stop. You say, and by the way, you do have a right to do that because it's a real love group. And you tell him something like what I just said. We're all here to learn this subject. You're not criticizing his subject. He's simply discussing it in the wrong place. If he says, well, this is important to me, because I've been there when people do this, you suggest that he start his own group. And then he can talk about philosophers of the Western world or Indian ashrams or whatever. Then you interrupt him every time he does it. Because intrusive people tend to become pretty insistent about their right to intrude and dominate. He will then either decide to learn more about real love or he'll leave the group. You win either way. I've seen this many, many times. And as long as you stick to the subject at hand, it works out. I've never seen it go badly, actually. Here's a member who says, no, she didn't say. This is a note to myself. It was either a week or 2 ago that I read comments about a woman who said that her 26-year-old granddaughter had suddenly and unexpectedly died. She said, what should I do? The short version of my answer, best I remember it, I didn't go back and find it, is funerals and everything around them have to do with the comfort of the living. They're not about the dead. So love everybody who's left behind. Love her parents, one of whom must be one of your children. Love her siblings. Love the people that come to the funeral. Love the people that come to the wake or whatever particular ceremonies surround the funeral. Love them. So she wrote just a few days ago. She said, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Not cry at my granddaughter's funeral yesterday or the whole week before because my kids were almost in constant contact with me. Now, how do I get out of this no tears prison that I've put myself in? Yeah, I'll bet it did seem like a prison to put your needs aside and see to the needs of everybody else. But you took care of their needs now, so now you cry. You cry alone, you cry to God, you call people who love you, you grieve, you feel her loss until you feel complete. Go for it, kid. It's time to grieve. It's okay. But grieve with people that love you. Don't grieve with people who fix you with little platitudes and cute little things to say. Just people who hold you, either in person or on the phone or however. And the love will heal your wounds. Still a loss. You'll still think about her. You'll still miss her. But the love will heal the wounds. Won't return your granddaughter to you in this lifetime, but you'll be able to continue. Here's a lady who says, how do I handle an older member of our weekly Real Love group? I laugh when I read the term older member now because I look at people that I think of as old and they're my age. How do I handle this older member who plays the victim when I work with her, who won't listen to the help and keeps talking and will not allow you to stop her? Honey, you have to be the wise person whose job is to what? It's really simple. We get confused with the complexity of being a wise person. Love and teach. Always love and teach. Victims must not be allowed to continue with their ranting and complaining and endless whining and blaming. If you have to get up from where you're sitting and put a chair right in front of her so you can sit on it yourself and talk to her and get her attention, then do that. Hold up your hand. I I've only had to do this once. Went into the kitchen and got 2 pots and came back into the room and banged 2 pots together. No kidding. So why is it so important to interrupt a victim? Because they're annoying? Well, they are sometimes, but no, that's not the reason. Every second that a victim speaks, 2 terrible things are happening. First, from the silence of the people who are listening, victims gather votes. No kidding. They're constantly canvassing for votes that confirm the truth of everything they're saying. That's a disaster because it keeps them victims. If nobody objects to what they're saying, they take it as assent, as agreement. Second reason, the whole reason she is a victim is that nobody's ever really listened to her. And if you let her go on and on, which is what she's been doing all her life, which hasn't worked, she'll never get the feeling that you actually hear her. Really hearing her, really listening to her, doesn't just mean that the sound of her voice enters your ears. So you have to stop her. She can't start learning while she's controlling and manipulating. Like we talked about before, a cocaine addict can't start being happy until they stop using cocaine completely. You have to stop her victimhood for almost exactly the same reason. A victim can't learn, a victim can't feel love till they quit it. And sometimes you have to get pretty forceful with people. But if you do, many of them finally break down and let you love them. Now, some of them just get angrier and then stomp out of the room. Like I suggested earlier, you win either way. So if she gets mad, you ramp up the stopping. She has to stop. She's running toward the edge of a cliff. She's got to be stopped. Do you get it? The whole reason that victims ramp up their victimhood and their anger is so you won't stop them. So if you let her keep talking, again, you've confirmed her victimhood and you've reaffirmed her addiction. So then what? Then you tell her you want to listen. Nobody ever tells victims that. They just sit there silently going, oh, how much longer is this going to go on? You say, I really want to listen to you, but in a different way from how everyone has listened all your life. Obviously, in all your 7 decades of living, all the people who've just allowed you to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk haven't helped, have they? So why continue that? So you ask her to summarize her life in 2 sentences. She won't be able to. So then you do it. If you need some examples, read the victim book. I give you examples of how to do that in the victim book. Summarize her pain in her life in 2 sentences. I'll give you an example. So this would apply to, about 80% of the people that are sitting in front of you. You say, you've been in pain all of your life because nobody has ever listened to you or truly loved you. That's 1 sentence. 2, you're sick of living like this and you just want somebody to care about you deeply and completely. 2 sentences. And then you say, you ask her if you left anything out that really matters. I have done this on countless occasions. And the answer is almost invariably, well, no, because you just summarized their whole life in 2 sentences. Then you ask her if she wants to be happy, yes or no, not blah, 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 yes or no, do you want to be happy? If she does, you can give her different judgments or different perspectives that will allow her to feel completely different from how she does now. That's the whole essence of event, judgment, feeling, reaction. For example, she says, everybody is unkind to her. Wrong. How would you change that judgment? Nobody is unkind to her. In fact, she's really not that important to almost anybody in the world. They're just in pain. And in their pain, they can't care about her. But she keeps trying to get love from people who are in pain. She's trying to get blood from a turnip, milk from a bull. She has to get it from people who know what they're doing. But she has to listen, not complain. The complaining has never worked. This is all big stuff that a wise person has to be able to do. Later on, this same member wrote to me and said, "Thank you so much. This really helps. One more thing. She says her childhood was happy. Her parents loved her, blah, 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 on and on." Kind of like the guy that I was just telling you about who wrote me an email and said he'd been unconditionally loved, but his life just sucked. She's in her late 70s and has a son living with her who she describes as slightly handicapped, but he could never live on his own, so she has to take care of him, and he inconveniences her every second of the day. Oh my gosh, imagine. It's very likely that she keeps her son handicapped so that he will need her. It's as close to love as she knows. And then she has something else to complain about. You continue. "It's been a nightmare. She got on a conference call and just tied the host in knots." Everybody who's listening, who's a host, who's a wise man, who's a coach, listen, we are not here to perpetuate victimhood. Not even to listen to pain. We're here to love and teach. See the difference? Listening alone is not the goal. It's a means toward loving and teaching. Not just listening. You could listen to a victim till both they and you are dead and there will be no happy product. Now, about her not admitting to her unhappy childhood. You know, I talk to people about their childhoods and I try to help them see how they got in the position where they are, but I just don't really care all that much about it. I've gone whole interventions of 3 days with people, and at the end realized that I never one time asked about the parents of either person. Doesn't really matter. What matters is what's the solution. Sometimes I'll even say, when I say that their childhood was unhappy and they start to protest, I go, "Oh, whoa, sorry. I apologize. I wasn't clear. You thought we were having a discussion about your childhood. I'm not asking you if your childhood was unhappy. I'm telling you that it was miserable." Sometimes then people will say, "Well, but how could you know such a thing? You weren't there." Honey, I'm looking at you. That's how I know it was miserable. If I'm walking through a pasture and I step in a great big pile of steaming cow poop, it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to go, "There was a cow here." I'm standing in what passes out the back end of a cow, and it depends on my mood, I suppose. But sometimes I'll say to people, I'm looking at what passed out the back end of an unloving family. So it's not a mystery. And if people refuse to say their childhood was unhappy and their parents didn't love them, whatever. I'll just skip on and just go, "Okay, I don't care. But you're unhappy now. So what are we going to do about that?" Because sometimes understanding their past helps people, and some people just can't deal with it. But the solution is the same. So treat the disease. When I was worked in emergency rooms for 6 years, we used to see strep throats quite a bit. You wouldn't think I'd be an emergency, but many people use emergency rooms as their primary care facility. And we learned that a strep throat looks a certain way and a viral throat looks another way. So we would see people that had, pus all over the back of their tonsils, and we'd give them penicillin, and the people that just had red tonsils but not pus all over the place, that was viral, and we wouldn't give them penicillin. And then they did a double-blind study where they took a bunch of ear, nose, and throat doctors, not just doctors. These are the guys that specialize in throats. And they had them examine, it's like 1,000 patients. And then they did throat cultures. And they compared the results of the cultures with the diagnosis made by the ear, nose, and throat guys, whether it was viral or bacterial. Because with bacterial, you treat it with an antibiotic, and viral, you don't. And the results were almost within 0.1%. It was uncanny. The accuracy of the ENT doctors was 50%, which means you could go into an emergency room, just flip a coin. Or just don't get into an emergency room, treat yourself. So it turns out they didn't know. So until they developed a faster test to diagnose strep, which they now can do, they can just stick a swab in the back of your throat, stick it in this little bottle and go, poof, it's strep or it's not. We just treated them all with penicillin because the treatment was the same. Same with real love. When people are unhappy, they need more love in their lives. And over-analyzing their childhoods, marginally important, or in some cases counterproductive. So wonderful questions as usual, and I'm always grateful for them. So please send them in. You're sending them in by the truckload. We save them even if we don't use them, and we try to get to the ones from members first. Lots of details, lots of information, but again, remember, it's about how you feel. Tell the truth about yourself. Find people who can unconditionally love you. Trust it. Remember it. And as your feelings change, your life will. See you in a week.